I used to think the worst sound in the world was a smoke alarm at 3 in the morning. I was wrong. The worst sound is your phone buzzing on a nightstand with a message you're not supposed to see, lighting up a room where the person you love is breathing softly like nothing is wrong. The worst sound is silence right after that, when you decide whether you'll be the man who ignores it or the man who looks. My name is Marcus. I'm 43. I fix other people's problems for a living, operations, logistics, the boring kind of competence that keeps warehouses from eating themselves. My wife is or was Naomi, 39, an events planner who could thread chaos into a bow. We were married for 12 years, together for 15. Nothing in our story is cinematic. 2 bedrooms, a mortgage, a ridiculous orange cat named Atlas who thinks cardboard is a lifestyle choice, a friend group that rotates board game nights and potlucks. Our photos were not spectacular. They were consistent. I thought that was the point. People always want to know when the first crack showed. It was not the night my phone buzzed. It was earlier, the sort of shift you only recognize in hindsight. Naomi began coming home smelling like hotel lobbies, citrus cleanser, cold air, something floral you can't quite place. She said it was event season. January through May was always heavy. Trade shows, galas, fundraisers, pop-ups. The language made everything sound temporary. Temporary is a warm mask for permanent. She upgraded her phone for work. She started wearing flats she could run in and dresses that looked like they got places on time. There was a new laugh that wasn't new, just reserved, rare. A laugh I thought she only took out with me that she started polishing somewhere else. She asked about a weekend apart to reset, said she wanted to book an Airbnb with a bathtub big enough for thinking. I suggested we go together. She smiled in that way you use on a child who wants to help stir a hot pan and said, "I love you for asking." The night my phone buzzed, I woke to a sound like an insect trapped behind glass. Naomi had draped a sweater over her screen before bed, the way you shade a lamp. The sweater glowed. I slid the sleeve back. The preview was a pinned location and a line of text. Same place, room on the corner. 2 Hammersmartin. It came from a contact labeled with a single letter, V. I could have woken her up. I could have asked 1,000 questions into her sleep-warmed hair. I didn't. I watched the little map spin into focus. Downtown, 2 blocks from the river, the boutique hotel with the lobby fireplace everyone uses as a meeting point because it makes strangers look friendly. I set the phone down like it might explode. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling and counted the little dots on the smoke detector. I thought about not being a paranoid husband. I thought about a letter of the alphabet standing in my kitchen, confident enough to be a single consonant. Naomi stirred and said my name thickly, like honey. I said I couldn't sleep. She snuggled closer, an old choreography, and my body did what it always did, believed her. Morning came like a bruise. She kissed my shoulder, made coffee, hummed a song I didn't recognize, left early to meet a florist. Atlas followed her to the door, tail high like a prayer flag. When the door shut, the house did that thing it does when the heater kicks off, a soft settling, as if the walls had decided something. I went to work and moved crates on a screen and answered emails with sentences that sounded like competent win. At lunch, I walked around the block and passed 3 people who looked like they were in love and wanted to stop each one and ask what proof they had. That night, Naomi came home with a story about a vendor who tried to double charge and a shrug like she'd lifted the entire day over her head and set it back down. I kissed her and tasted mint and fear. We ate pasta and watched a show about people who want to live on islands and said, "We could never live like that," and laughed together, which felt like stealing. I did not ask about V. I turned into someone I didn't recognize. I started checking phone bills not for numbers, just for clusters. Unless you have done this, you cannot understand the intimacy of that particular spreadsheet of despair. So many small conversations threaded through a week like seams only one person can see. I set a boundary. If I was going to lose my mind, I would keep my dignity. I would not be the man who scrolls through his wife's text messages while she sleeps. I would not turn myself into a lockpick. So I did something worse. I installed a Find My Device app on her old tablet that still lived in a drawer. I told myself it was for safety because the city had been weird lately. Friday night, close to midnight, I watched the little dot that represented Naomi leave the event space near the stadium and slide toward the hotel with the corner rooms. The dot paused for 20 minutes on a side street. Then it moved into the building. It stayed there until 2:14 a.m. The dot left and went home. At 2:38 a.m., our front door opened very quietly, as if sound could absolve. Saturday morning, I made pancakes. Naomi got out of the shower smelling like rain and lemons. I asked if the florist was helpful. She said yes, her eyes doing that small deflection dance. The one you do when you don't want to lie exactly. I looked at her hands and realized I knew them better than my own. There are roads on your partner's knuckles you could navigate without light. I confronted her that evening, not with rage, but with a question so small it almost didn't exist. "Who is V?" I asked. At first she laughed, a stage laugh. "My vendor spreadsheet is naming itself now?" I said, "Room 214. The laugh died. She picked up a mug and put it down without drinking and said, "Marcus?" My name in her mouth had been home. Now it was a hedge. She stared at our cat the way you look at an exit. She told me a story. It was nimble and used words like boundaries and emotional connection and did not touch the sides of the hotel. V was, she said, Victoria, a colleague, a friend she met at conferences, someone who made the long days lighter. The letter stood for discretion because the industry is gossipy, because women in their 30s cannot even have coffee together without someone asking if they're plotting. "We're allowed to have friends," she said, and I agreed because the most humiliating part of this kind of fight is that the general principle is true. I asked to see messages. She said she wouldn't hand me her phone like she was a teenager, and I was a parent. She said, "We can go to therapy if you want control so badly." I said I didn't want control, I wanted trust. She said same thing, which told me more than the dot in the map and every line item on a bill. We did therapy. We sat on couches that had been sat on by every tired person in our neighborhood, wiped with every brand of institutional sanitizer. The therapist had glasses with blue frames and the kind of voice that makes you think of soft blankets. Naomi didn't name V there either. She talked about feeling invisible, about me bringing home spreadsheets of exhaustion, about how people at work saw the spark in her. I talked about my terror of being needy, my fear of breaking the things I want to keep. We drew genograms and trace patterns and cried into tissues we didn't pay for up front, but would later as a line item we could both agree to. We made rules like we were drawing up a constitution for a small country. Phone use in common spaces, yes, but not police work. Alerts about late nights, names, not initials. "If there's nothing to hide," I said, and I hated how I sounded. "There's nothing to hide," she said, and I hated that it still felt like there was. For a while, the house got warmer. Naomi put her phone on the counter, face up. We cooked a complicated stew together, like we were auditioning for a commercial about joint effort. She fell asleep on my chest, and my heart beat somewhere it hadn't lived in months. 2 weeks later, I walked into a hotel lobby with a box of donuts and 2 cups of coffee, like the world's saddest surprise party. I was not trying to catch anyone. I was trying to prove myself ridiculous, to hand my own paranoia a pastry and send it walking. Naomi had said she was doing a walkthrough for a pharmaceutical dinner. I was downtown for a meeting anyway. I sat on a velvet chair and watched the elevator doors open and close, and imagined the therapist applauding my courage. At 11:10, the elevator opened and Naomi appeared, laughing, her hair in a braid that looked casual and could not be. She laughed at something someone behind her said, that someone stepped out of the elevator too, not a Victoria, a man. Gray suit, navy tie, the kind of tan you maintain with a schedule. He touched the small of her back like he'd been given permission many times. She didn't flinch. For a second, she looked exactly like a woman who belonged in that lobby with that man. I did not stand. I did not shout. I sunk into the velvet as if it might swallow me. I waited until they passed around a ficus and disappeared down a hall that smelled like rosemary and an apology no one meant. I walked to the front desk and asked, stupidly, if I could leave the donuts with the event planner. The clerk smiled and told me there were 4 on site. I said, Naomi Gray. The clerk said, she's off property. I said, right. I walked outside. The river had decided to look metallic. People were eating lunch on benches and the sun had nostalgia built into it. I sat on a low wall and ate a donut with frosting, too sweet, and cried in the most dignified way a grown man can cry in public. Sunglasses, jaw tight, both feet planted. The talk that night sounded like two people reading from different scripts and insisting they matched. I said hotel lobby. She said lobby is public. I said the back. She said work. I said who is he? She said a vendor. I said V. She said nothing, and then she said everything, and then she said, I need some space. Space is such a polite word. It looks like kindness on a line. It tastes like exit in your mouth. Naomi moved into the guest room. It was not a separation, we told ourselves, which is how separations often start. For a few days we did that choreography of good intentions. Breakfast together, updates about schedules, therapy appointments on a shared calendar, sleep in separate air. Atlas took turns, a tiny diplomat of orange fur. At 3 a.m., I caught myself talking to the cat because cats will not use your words against you later. The next week, my mother called to ask about Easter. I told her we might be traveling. She is not a woman who cries easily, but she made the sound mothers make when they do not want to pry and cannot not. I could have told her everything. I did not because telling is different from being believed. Sometimes you want the thing you are describing to stop being real long enough for you to decide who you are on the other side of it. I hired a private investigator. I do not recommend this if you are fond of illusions. He was efficient and kind in the way of people who have sat in a lot of cars eating a lot of gas station sandwiches. He called 3 days later with a voice that carried a blanket for me. He said, I have photos. He asked if I was alone. I said yes. Naomi was at a tasting. He emailed me pictures of my wife at lunch on a Wednesday with the man in the navy tie. Picture after picture of ordinary gestures, shared phone screens, a reach for the bill, a hand on a wrist. Then one of them standing too close in a parking garage, the kind of too close that has gravity. Then a series from another Friday, a night I had told myself she was at a meeting that had run long, where they entered the side door of the boutique hotel with the fireplace and left 3 hours later. The timestamp read 2:17 a.m. I stared so long I could see pixels. People say their hearts break. Mine didn't. It changed shape and refused to fit back in. I printed the pictures on the office printer like a coward. The paper came out warm and smelled like plastic and failure. I slid them into a manila folder because that is what men in movies do. And then I put the folder on our kitchen table and waited for her to come home. When she did, I poured wine into both glasses and moved the folder toward her with the stem. She looked at it the way you look at a thing you have avoided naming. She sat, opened it, closed her eyes, and put both hands flat on the table as if bracing for weather. What do you want me to say? She whispered. It was not an admission or a denial. It was a truce flag in a language I didn't speak. The truth, I said, and the words tasted like copper. She told me his name was Victor. I laughed once, loudly, like the room had given me a joke, and then stolen it. She said it wasn't serious. She said it had been oxygen in a season where she couldn't breathe. She said it made her feel young and bright. Words that cut because I had also wanted to feel those things and not known how to say so without sounding like a selfish child. She cried not like a person ashamed, but like a person exhausted by a long project. She said she hadn't meant to love him and then corrected herself. She hadn't meant to like him that much, as if changing verbs could change furniture. We did the paperwork dance for mercy, agreed to pause therapy, agreed to time apart, agreed to tell the truth even if it had the wrong shoes on. She slept at her sister's. I slept in a bed that smelled like someone who was not coming back. In the morning, the sun through the blinds did stripes on the wall, and I hated that beauty still had the nerve. Friends came by. One brought a casserole like we were grieving a person and not a language. One asked, "Do you want to talk about it?" In a way that made me love him for the offer and recoil at the idea. My brother took me for a drive up to the ridge, where you can see the whole so-called skyline, and said, "You don't have to be smart about this." And I nodded like I had any control over the amount of brain I bring to pain. Naomi texted from her sisters. I told him it's over. I choose us. I looked at the words the way you look at those pictures where two things can be true at once, depending on how you squint. I wanted to move back into the illusion where sentences like that fix things. Instead, I wrote back, we'll talk at noon. She arrived with her shoulders rounded into apology. She said what you say when you are good at handling people. The right regret in the right order. I told her I believed she was sorry. I said sorry is not the same as repaired. We tried again. Of course we did. The part of you that remembers vows is not a rational organ. 2 months of, again, morning walks, honest calendars, her phone in a bowl by the door like an offering. My anger lowered from a siren to a hum. We went to dinner and split a dessert, and she reached across the table and squeezed my fingers, and I thought, we will be the miracle people mention to themselves when they decide to forgive. The night it all actually ended, nothing dramatic happened. We were eating takeout on the couch. Her phone buzzed in the bowl by the door, with a sound I had come to believe was neutral. She got up, checked it, went still, and put it face down. I said, who? She said, my mother. I said, your mother never calls after 9. She said, she does when she can't sleep. I walked to the bowl and turned the phone over and saw a V on the screen with a message that said, I miss how you think. An odd sentence to send if you are not also missing a body. I put the phone back in the bowl like I had been burned. I didn't make a speech. I said, I can't keep doing alternate versions of our life. She didn't fight. She closed her eyes and nodded like a patient signing a consent form. We separated for real. No big announcements. No scorched earth on social media. I moved into a short-term rental above a closed sandwich shop that smelled like pickles in the floorboards. I learned what my things look like without her things to balance them. I learned how long a week is without someone texting you what to pick up from the store. I got used to the particular echo of a one-bedroom. I bought a lamp that made light where I needed it. I put the cat's tower by the window, and Atlas took up the job of watching the street like it owed him an explanation. Divorce is bureaucracy wearing grief's suit. There were signatures, notarizations, unromantic math. There were choices that felt like tiny deaths, and others that felt like a surgeon removing something that might have killed me if it stayed. Naomi kept the house. I took the hatchback. We split the savings. I gave her the copper pans because she loved them. She insisted I take the good coffee maker because I wake earlier. We were still kind, which is its own knife. You can be kind and still be incapable of staying. Months siphoned off. The ache lost its edges. I learned the names of the baristas downstairs, and they learned I always order the same thing when my hands shake. My mother asked again about Easter. I told her the truth this time. She cried the second time too, and this time I did not hang up until her breathing evened out. My brother invited me to a baseball game, and we didn't talk about anything that mattered, and it mattered anyway. The therapist and I kept meeting until one day I realized I had said Naomi only once in an hour, and I hadn't swallowed glass doing it. One afternoon in late summer, I saw Naomi across a street I hadn't meant to be on. She was carrying a bouquet of white hydrangeas, the kind she always said looked like expensive clouds. She looked good. She looked like herself. She did not look like my home. I wanted to wave. I did not because I was angry, but because some ghosts deserve their peace. People ask if she stayed with V. I don't know. There were rumors because people love to tuck other people's endings into their own narratives. I heard he moved departments. I heard he was someone's husband when he wasn't with mine. I heard nothing that changed the price of coffee or the way the sun feels on a forearm at a stoplight. I kept a little tablet that had showed me a dot moving across a city like a lie with shoes. I reset it. I gave it to my niece for her birthday with a drawing app and a stylus and the unspoken wish that she never knows why some men count stars on small screens at 2 a.m., as if constellations could tell them who they are. Sometimes at night I wake for no reason and expect the room to perform a tragedy. It doesn't. The worst thing is over and the rest is weather. I get up and make toast and eat it standing at the sink the way bachelors in movies do when the scene doesn't require dialogue. I stand on the balcony and look at the city with its stitched-together noises, and I am overwhelmed by how many lives are being lived correctly and disastrously at once. There are days I feel clean joy for no particular reason, and then a moment of guilt like I have failed grief. There are days when a song catches me by the throat in a produce aisle, and I have to pretend the pineapple is very interesting. There are mornings I wake up and do not reach out to the other side of the bed, and the lack doesn't feel like a missing tooth anymore. It feels like a tongue that has learned the new map of a mouth. If you found this because your phone glowed on a nightstand and you are deciding what kind of person you will be, here is what I know. You can love someone with your whole body and still need to leave the building. You can be gentle and absolute. You can skip the melodrama and still be devastated. You can resist the urge to talk about your pain like a brand and still be real. You can survive the fact that a single letter can take your life apart. You can forgive in one lifetime without inviting the wound back in to check your work. On the day the divorce was final, I took the afternoon off and drove without a plan until I ended up by the river. A wedding party had turned the park into a swan of chiffon and rented delight. Their photographer told them to walk slower and laugh bigger. I stood behind a sycamore and wished them a life in which the worst thing they have to survive is a too small dance floor. Then I sat on a bench and ate a gas station sandwich and did not cry because sometimes the body just wants mustard. When I got home, Atlas swatted at my keys like he'd missed them more than he missed me. I fed him and watered the plant I've somehow kept alive and cleaned the kitchen without thinking. My phone buzzed with a group chat about trivia night, with a spam caller offering me a new warranty, with a calendar reminder to take out the trash. No letters lit up my screen that could undress a marriage. I lay down on the couch and listened to the building's collective heartbeat. The elevator, the neighbor's footsteps, the hum that means all of us are still here. I fell asleep without any app telling me where anyone was, and when I woke up, the first thing I felt was not dread. It was hunger. I made eggs. I burned the toast. I laughed out loud alone and did not feel pathetic. I carried my plate to the little table by the window and looked down at the street where people were proving that 1,000 tiny normal things can keep the earth spinning. I thought of Naomi and hoped she was telling the truth to herself, even if I never got it from her. I thought of the man in the navy tie and felt nothing, which is another word for freedom that doesn't look good on a necklace but fits a chest. If there's a moral, it's boring. Check your assumptions more than you check devices. Listen to your gut before it learns to whisper. And when someone tells you they need space, ask them how much gravity they plan to bring back. If you're the one with a letter for a name in someone else's phone, step back from the part of the story where you are flattered by your own disruption. Somebody is at a kitchen table holding a folder that smells like fresh toner, and that is not the kind of beauty anyone survives on purpose. I deleted the tracking app last week. It asked me if I was sure, like it was the only friend I had left. I thumbed yes, and the icon went away. The night after, I woke at 2:14 a.m., muscle memory, and stared at the ceiling. No dots moved, no maps rearranged, just the dark, which was finally only dark. I got up, poured water, sat on the edge of the bed, and listened to the quiet of a life that no longer required evidence to be true. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. It means a lot. New stories like this one are posted every single day, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one. And if this story touched you, please give it a like. It really helps more people find our content.